Hello and welcome to News Blitzer. April 5, 2025, marked a historic turning point in U.S. politics. Whether the protests force policy changes or simply harden divisions, one thing is clear. Millions of Americans are unwilling to stay silent as Trump and Musk reshape the nation. The hands-off protests saw vast numbers of Americans, including the youth, the middle-aged and the elderly folk, rallying against Trump's cuts to healthcare, Social Security, and civil rights, with major events in cities like Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. According to various estimates, millions of Americans joined the protests in 1,200 different protest sites spread across 50 states to express their opposition to the disastrous policies of the Trump administration after Trump got re-elected as president in 2024. The protests were a culmination of discontent, organized by a coalition including Move On, Indivisible, and Planned Parenthood. Within weeks of assuming power, the Trump administration reinstated family separations at the border, leading to widespread outcry, appointed Elon Musk to lead the DOGE, which immediately began slashing federal jobs, and advanced Project 2025. Project 2025 is a comprehensive political initiative led by the Heritage Foundation, in collaboration with over 100 conservative organizations, designed to prepare a conservative presidential administration in the United States. It aims to reshape the federal government and consolidate executive power by providing a detailed roadmap for policy, personnel, and immediate action upon taking office. It also provides a step-by-step plan for the first 6 months of a new administration to enact immediate changes and establish control, which Trump is apparently pursuing to the loss of the United States. The new policies also included stringent immigration controls, rollbacks on environmental protections, and attacks on transgender rights. The U.S. courts too have come down heavily on the Trump administration over the very same issues raised by the protesters. The creation of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, headed by Elon Musk, aimed at streamlining government operations, was leading to nonsensical and unjustified mass layoffs and erosion of public services. This, coupled with Project 2025, ignited public outrage. The protesters called for Trump's impeachment, seeing it as a stand against his lingering power, even as president. Others demanded Musk's removal from DOGE, accusing him of overreach. Participants chanted slogans like, "Hands off our rights," and "Deport Musk," focusing on issues such as healthcare cuts, Social Security threats, and anti-immigrant policies. Chants also included, "No deportations, no dictators," with organizers like Move On leading the charge. These were largely peaceful, with chants like, "Hands off our rights," and calls for Musk's removal. The protests stretched from Anchorage, Alaska, to Miami, Florida, with major gatherings in San Francisco and Philadelphia. The protests built on earlier movements like the February 2025 Day Without Immigrants and the 50,501 protests on February 5, 2025. However, the scale underscores their significance, potentially rivaling the largest single-day protests in U.S. history. Social media, particularly X, was instrumental in organizing and amplifying these protests. Hashtags like #HandsOff2025 and #April5 protest trended, with organizers using X to coordinate events and share information, as seen in posts by and viral videos, such as those seen in X posts, helped galvanize support, showing dense crowds in cities like St. Augustine, Florida, and Salt Lake City. However, misinformation was a concern, with pro-Trump accounts attempting to discredit the protests, as noted in discussions on media coverage. The protests drew a diverse crowd, including students, workers, retirees, and activists, with leadership decentralized and driven by local organizers. National figures like Jamie Raskin addressed the Washington, D.C. rally, but the movement was more grassroots, with participation from communities concerned about education funding cuts, veterans, and even some dissatisfied Trump voters. Quotes from participants, such as Margaret Wilmoth from Columbus, Ohio, expressing shock at democracy's changes, underscore the broad appeal. "I'm appalled by democracy's changes in the last, specifically 2 weeks, but it started a long time ago," Margaret Wilmoth, a self-described senior citizen from Columbus, told Boston Herald. "So I'm just trying to put a presence into resistance." The "hands off" highlights deep divisions and passionate engagement in American society. The movement's broad coalition and use of social media suggest a sustained resistance, with implications for American democracy and governance. The protest scale, comparable to the 2017 Women's March or the 2020 Black Lives Matter demonstrations, underscores their importance. Supported by over 150 organizations, including labor unions, civil rights groups, and advocacy networks, the movement reflects a broad coalition united against the administration's agenda. This level of mobilization suggests a capacity to influence political discourse by drawing attention to issues like economic inequality, healthcare access, and democratic governance. In the short term, the protests are unlikely to prompt immediate policy changes from the Trump administration. Historically, Trump has dismissed large-scale opposition, often doubling down on his agenda. The White House has already defended its policies in response to the protests, indicating resistance to altering course. While the protests have garnered significant media coverage, amplifying their message, the polarized political climate may limit their ability to sway lawmakers or force legislative action in the near term. However, the protests have a stronger potential to influence public opinion. By spotlighting policies that affect broad segments of the population, such as social security and government downsizing, they could shift perceptions of the administration's priorities. The diverse coalition behind the protests, coupled with their visibility in both U.S. and international cities, may resonate with voters who feel marginalized by these policies, potentially broadening opposition to Trump and Musk's initiatives. Looking toward future elections, the hands-off protests could energize opposition voters, particularly for midterm races or the 2028 presidential election. The emphasis on economic and democratic concerns, issues with cross-partisan appeal, might increase voter turnout among those disillusioned with the administration. However, translating protest energy into electoral success will require sustained organization and a clear strategy, building on the momentum of April 5, 2025. Historically, large-scale protests have acted as catalysts for political change when paired with broader efforts, such as legislative advocacy and electoral campaigns. The hands-off protests could mark the beginning of a sustained resistance movement, especially if the coalition of 150-plus organizations continues to coordinate. Their ultimate impact will depend on whether this initial wave of activism evolves into a structured push for policy reform or electoral victories. Do let us know your views on the issue in the comments box below, and if you have not already done so, do subscribe to this channel for cutting-edge news reports, analysis and exclusives. Thank you once again.